and we're here with Colene of the Heels on Wheels radio program. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure to join you guys. And just to give the background, I co-host along with Sue Mason, Ali Boulay, and Jacob Seelman, Heels on Wheels on the Performance Motorsport Network. So we're like the premier radio show in North America, motorsport-wise, covering women in motorsport, which makes it interesting because we end up talking to a lot of racers
Yeah,
from a wide
I bet.
variety of disciplines on the show, which is really, really cool. And I've been co hosting the show now for, let's say, maybe 4 or 5 years. It's
What's
been a
that been
long
like?
time. What's that been like co hosting it that long? Well, I've gone through a lot of co hosts.
Yeah.
The turnover on something like that unfortunately ends up being high. We've gone through having one of my co-hosts at one point in time was Krista Art, who's a drag racer. Sabrina Ekstrom co-hosted on the show for a while. She was driving
Cool.
dirt late models or UMP dirt modifieds. I'm trying to think who else. Oh, Jenna Gorillo was a co-host on the show at one point in time. She was a Formula Atlantic driver. So, yeah, we've
Have you
we've
ever
gone
gotten any
through.
backlash from all that stuff online, or?
Yeah, well, we got backlash on one, like on the odd occasion, we get some backlash from some people who don't necessarily agree
Right.
with the somewhat feminist bent that we have for the show.
Right.
I can give you a great example. There had been an article in Jalopnik that we had shared on our Facebook page that was about a woman named Joan Newton Cuneo, who back in 1908 and 1909 was going out and beating the guys and winning races that were sanctioned by AAA. So for 1910, AAA turned around and banned women from racing outright in any of their sanctioned
Wow.
events. And the claim on the Jalopnik article, which was backed up by other information, was that part of the reason AAA did that was because Joan Newton Cuneo and several other women who were competing at that point in time were actually out there winning races and kicking the guys' butts. So they banned them because they didn't like
Wow.
being beat by women.
Right. Yeah.
And so we had one particular guy who decided he was going to troll us on this right on the Facebook page. And if you go back and look at our history, you can see this. He decided to troll us on this and claimed that Jalopnik was, what was the phrase he used? Liberal snowflake left wing media, I think.
Yeah.
We
I'm.
were
I'm not
like,
gonna. I'm not one to. And I don't want to jump on that, but that's a whole other. But yeah, I see what you mean though. That's a complete.
and we
Wow,
were
that's a
just
complete
kind of like,
asshole comment.
dear, seriously, you're calling Jalopnik liberal left wing media?
Yeah.
Wow, when did they step up to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we got that. There was the point in time when Susie Wolf was dealing with, Formula One stuff, and we had some guy, and this was beautiful because I had the perfect comeback to this one. We had a gentleman comment on the Facebook post that, and I'm going to use this word, so hopefully you don't have to bleep this out.
We're
Having a
good.
vagina did not qualify one to drive a race car.
Wow. On
My
Facebook.
immediate my immediate response to that was, well, last time I checked, having a penis didn't qualify you either.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Nowhere in that does it say
Yeah.
that's a rule, right?
So yeah, I mean, we kind of get a little bit of that bend every once in a while. Sometimes we have some heated discussion about whether or not what we're posting about certain things is sexist or not sexist, because that's a matter of degrees and how people see it.
Right.
But overall, our goal is essentially to promote women in motorsport on the show who are kind of lost in that big marketing machine that when I started doing this was still the Four Sisters and Danica Patrick.
Right.
Because there are a whole whackload of women that are racing, crewing, engineering, all kinds of stuff all over motorsport, and you rarely hear about them because they're lost in the background. So we tried to bring some of them to the foreground, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great because there are a lot of people lost in the background at races, and I see a lot of them. They do need to get some recognition, and I
Hmm.
also like to try to get in touch with them as much as possible as well. I know they're busy at the tracks as well, and I want to stay out of their work, but
Yeah.
it's always great to try to get a hold of some of those people.
Yeah. Well, 2018 for me was a fabulous year because I used to go walking through the IndyCar paddock and I'd stop in front of Ganassi Racing and go, "Hey, that's Danielle Shepherd.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, that's Kate Dunlap." You know,
That's always a
and
fun walk.
well, and it was a really neat one because in 2018, at that point in time, Sylvia Bellot was the general manager for Carlin Racing, and in her off weekends with Carlin Racing, she was, of course, the only and the first woman Formula One steward. So she was really, really a cool person to connect to at the track because she was also and still is currently the nominated representative on the FIA Women in Motorsport Commission
Neat.
for race officials. So she's really cool to talk to.
And also tying in the Canadian side of things too.
Yeah,
There's a lot of it just in our own backyard as well.
absolutely. Show up at, for example, Oshweekon outside of Brantford on the Six
Yeah.
Nations Indian, Native
I wanted to
Reservation.
go there, obviously, this summer with the Pinties returning there, but
Yeah. Oh
that
man.
would have been cool.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was looking forward to that one too because I thought, oh man, I totally got to see stock cars on this track. But even you show up at a regional race weekend at Shannonville, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, you will find women there. In
Hmm.
road racing, there are a smaller number of them
Right.
that are directly involved. There's a really decent percentage involved in oval track racing, not paved oval, but dirt oval, I found. And that's the interesting part is they're there at the local track. You just kind of gotta actually take a look to see them. And yeah, so we've done all that kind of thing. I think one of the coolest people we ever interviewed was three-time world champion snowmobile racer Krista Mackey Zern. But the interesting part of that is she was not racing snowmobiles on snow. She was racing them on lakes in June.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, so we've interviewed some really neat people. We've interviewed snowmobile racers, we've interviewed tractor racers, ATV racers. Yeah, I mean, we've interviewed all kinds of folks. It's been neat.
And you've also had some participation at racetracks as marshal.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot of fun. And actually, it's three-pronged. I am both a licensed chief pit official, licensed chief scrutineer, and a licensed flag marshal.
So you yourself are the women that you can find at potentially at a local track, or you've done
Yeah.
some stuff in the states as well.
Yeah, actually, I've done some interesting stuff. So as a scrutineer, I've actually volunteered to scrutineer with what used to be the Pirelli World Challenge Series. I think it's now the SRO GT Challenge America. So I used to scrutineer with them.
Nice.
I've also chief scrutineered a significant number of regional races at Calabogie, Shannonville, and Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. I have been a chief pit marshal for the promoters of the Canadian Touring Car Championship. I handled being the chief pit official for their non-CTCC races on the same weekend, so all the support races. And then in terms of flagging, I've flagged the Detroit Belle Isle Grand Prix
That would have been cool.
a lot of times. Yeah, I'm really sad I'm not going to get to do that event in 2 weeks. You don't know how
Right.
sad I am. I've flagged all 3 years of the Baltimore Grand Prix. I've flagged IndyCar, NASCAR, and IMSA at Mid Ohio. I've flagged the 24 hours of Le Mans at Le Circuit South in France 3 times in 2015, 16, 17. In 2018, I did the 24 hours of Spa. I flagged International GT at Silverstone. I flagged British GT at
Wow, you've done a lot.
Silverstone. Yeah, and I also
Is it
flagged a
fun?
Dutch national race weekend, an amateur weekend at Zandvoort in the
Oh,
Netherlands.
cool.
So yeah, and I was actually planning to go back to Le Mans this year, hoping to be able to make it, but I'm not
But
so sure anymore.
yeah,
So
was it fun to do any of that, or is it kind of like, hey, you know what, this is serious. I got to focus
well,
here.
when you get to the level where you have the opportunity to flag something as high profile as the 24 hours of Le Mans or be a commissaire for that event, that's the point where you don't get to do things like say, oh, I don't feel like working that, I just want to work this position instead, which you can kind of get away with at regional racing to a certain extent,
Hmm.
because it's amateur racing. But once you get to a high profile event like that, essentially you look at your chef de poste and go, okay, so what am I doing when? And it doesn't matter what he tells you, you shut
Right.
up and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not that it's unenjoyable, it's that you need to display the professionalism of
Yeah.
being willing to do any part of the work that is part of your responsibility
Right.
without complaint. Because
Right. Yeah.
and you know, it was really exciting. It was a I mean, it's a massive event. Even with a day off and the opportunity to go into the village or the city and stuff. By the way, for those wondering, the city of Le Mans is actually about as big as Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Ontario.
Oh
It's
wow.
not a tiny village. It is not a tiny village.
Okay.
Um, but you know, you have to bring a certain level of professionalism with you, a willingness to compromise and do what's asked of you as opposed
Hmm.
to what you think you want to do. And you also have to understand that this is a significant event that can have, I mean, we work infield side of the second chicane on the Mulsanne. So we
Right.
get entry into that chicane and exit out of that chicane and anything that lands in the middle of that
Right.
chicane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, when they come down into the chicane to brake, they are literally going from probably 320, 330 kilometers an hour down to about 110.
Right. Yeah.
And if they screw that up, that may not be
No.
good.
Yeah. No. Um,
Uh,
that would be quite the heart-stopping experience, though.
it's an adrenaline rush
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. And I actually, one year we had a guy in a Ferrari in the actual 24 hours of Le Mans race. I don't think it ever got caught on video, but he decided to go to driver's right,
Hmm.
to make a pass on an Aston Martin. And he ended up two wheels off in the grass, driver's right. We were on driver's left. And he got ahead of the Aston Martin, but he didn't manage to get back on track the right way. And he literally rolled across the nose of the Aston Martin, came
Uh-oh.
flying right across track at us, went skipping past us so close I could have taken the flagstick and whacked the roof of the car as he was coming by, and I'm behind a guardrail. And then he hit the guardrail and bent up and broke about five posts, about probably
Wow. Wow, you're
20
lucky.
feet, yeah, 20 feet down from us. The Belgian guys across track are waving the flag like nuts. We're waving the yellow flag like nuts. And then we turn around to take a look, and the dust clouds cleared, and there's no car.
Yikes.
And we're like, the Belgian guys across track are signaling to me like, "Where's the car? Where's the car?" I'm like, "I don't know where the car is." As it turned out, the guy straightened the car out, drove it through the bypass, the
Oh,
escape road, and actually continued on at the exit of the chicane and went back to the pits. And we
wow.
were like, "That guy just broke our guardrail.
Wow.
How?" You know?
So you
So
definitely have some good experiences with avoiding certain death, basically.
I'm very light on my feet. As I used to say, you know, I was kind of glad cell phones and YouTube weren't around when I was a kid because all the stupid, ridiculous stuff I did as a kid would end up on YouTube. And then somebody pointed out to
Or
me that all of
TikTok
the
or whatever.
really whacked, dangerous, stupid stuff I do now is on YouTube.
Nice. Well, go check it out.
So seriously, well, actually, there's a clip from it was a fourth restart for an IndyCar race, Turn One, Detroit. I think it was 2013 or 2012. And there's a beautiful clip of a 13 car incident. That yeah happened right in front of me.
Was that the Corvette, or was that was a couple years ago, I
No,
think.
no, this wasn't the Corvette. This was IndyCar. So this is one where
Okay.
Bourdais got into power, they spun, and then the rest of the field just stacked in.
Okay.
And they wound up. It was funny because Saavedra was involved, Hinchcliffe was involved, Justin Wilson was still alive then, so he was involved. Ed Carpenter, Mike Conway. I'm trying to think who else was
Did a no
involved
name
in
win
that
that
one.
race, kind of thing?
I can't even remember who won the race because my brain's stuck on this thing. Anyway, they pulled all these cars out of the tire wall, Ryan Briscoe stuff. They pulled all these cars out of the tire wall after we actually wound up having to red flag the thing. And underneath all these other cars, lo and behold, Alex Tagliani. We had no idea he was
Oh,
even there
right.
because he was buried.
Back in the day when he
So,
was racing still.
So yeah, anyway, if you can find this, it's one of the we hold the record for the most number of Indy cars wrecked in one corner in a single incident at
Whoops.
Detroit.
Were you there for when the pace car spun out? I forget
Yes,
what
I
year that
was not
was.
at that corner though.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
it
would have
was
been something.
really weird watching Graham Rahal go by and nobody else, and I'm looking at my comm operator going,
What's going
Where's
on?
the pace car? Where's the rest of the field? Like, what just happened?"
Yeah, that would have been funny.
Oh yeah,
Um,
no, I was actually at the corner where Santino Ferrucci got sent flying through the
oh
air.
wow.
So yeah, we've had some interesting experiences over the years, that's for sure. Most of it caught on video and on YouTube now. So
So
hey,
what's more recently? I've obviously seen you in the media center at CTMP the last
yeah,
few years. So you're 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 kind of doing that in this area. Do you ever travel down to the States, or what are you doing now?
it depends. For the most part, my media center work I do in Canada. Because I don't really officiate or have to be involved in as many race events in Canada.
Right.
The vast majority of the race events that I officiate end up being in the United States or over in Europe.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I really don't officiate in Canada. Although last year I did go officiate at the World Rallycross event at Trois Rivières, which
So
was a
you
lot of fun.
so you get to travel.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I don't tend to do anything. If I'm doing media stuff, it depends on where it is, what it is,
Right.
who's
Yeah.
there. Whereas there are other events where I just kind of I show up and I officiate. It's kind of funny. I don't flag at the Toronto Indy,
I was
but
about
I
to
go to
ask, have you
the
ever done that?
yeah, I have done it. I don't do it anymore.
Okay.
Last
Cool.
time I flagged it was I think 2008. But what I do is I show up at the Toronto Indy every year so that I can network because
Mm-hmm.
even though I'm doing a radio show and I'm not doing written or deadline media, one of the keys to being able to put people on the show is to network and record interviews, pre-recorded stuff.
Right.
So, I really need to be at the track in order to connect with PR people because face to face makes it
Oh
easier
yeah.
and connect with the people I've built the relationships with to say, hey, haven't seen you since last season. I noticed da 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 is going on, so on and so forth. Because some of these people I access without dealing with the team's PR people because I know them personally. Other people I have to go through the team's PR people in order
Right.
to access them. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, it depends on the nature of the connection and the relationship.
I've
And that networking piece, or what I like to refer to as working a paddock, is a really important part of what I do for putting together
right.
the radio shows.
Because it's I've done that the last couple of years at the Honda Indy, and
Mhm.
it's definitely a hectic place. And I
It
guess
is.
getting that more space out there in the paddock, that's probably one of the most important places to be, I think.
Yeah, and it's hectic in terms of you will show up to talk to somebody and you have to be very careful when you pick the time to show up.
Right.
So for
Yeah.
example, if I'm looking to talk to let's say I'm going to use her because she's easy to use at this point. I'm sure she'll forgive me. Kate Gunlack, who is now the performance engineer for Aero McLaren SP Racing in the IndyCar series. Showing up to talk to her 30 minutes after they've come off of a session on the track is dumb
Mm-hmm.
because she's not available, because she's analyzing data. They're debriefing with the drivers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, on the other hand, showing up 3 hours after that session, assuming there isn't another one scheduled,
Right.
that works.
So it helps to look at the schedule and
Exactly.
before you show up and kind of space things out as a media.
Yeah, and you also need to have an understanding of two things. Number one, you need to understand that things can go pear-shaped, and when they do, you need to piss off,
Right. Yeah. Right.
right?
Yep.
Because they don't have the time for you. They're not paid to talk to you. They're paid to do their job.
Right.
And the other thing that you need to understand as well is you need to understand how the team works and how they organize their work so that you make sure that you're showing up to network with somebody or talk with them at a point in time where you're not interfering with their ability to get their job done.
Right.
So it's a very fine balancing act and it can be very difficult. And I've had some weekends where I've gone to the track and literally walked away with absolutely nothing at the end of the weekend. And
Right.
I've had other times where I've walked away with three
Tons
shows
of
worth of
stuff.
audio.
Yeah. Yep.
It's hit or miss,
And
you know.
I feel like I don't think there's a how to or like a dummies, like I forget what the book series is called, like a dummy radio or media at racetracks for dummies or whatever. I don't feel
Nope.
like there's one of those, and I don't know if there's like a book somewhere or anything, but you have to kind of learn all this stuff by doing it and learning the hard way, and also
Hmm.
sometimes you really benefit from it. Like you said, you get a couple of shows worth of something, and sometimes you walk away with 10 minutes of something maybe, or
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. Or sometimes you walk away with a bunch of business cards, you follow up and still can't manage to
Right.
schedule the folks for the show. I think in terms of how it works, I had the benefit of having spent years at the track beforehand, so I understood how motorsport worked
Right.
and I understood how teams worked by and large. So realistically, for me, it was just a matter of, starting to talk to people and
Hmm.
figuring out who was what and who did what and who I needed to talk to about what. And I just kind of worked the connections that I had and managed to kind of move forward and be able to do it. The other thing is that, and I haven't had the opportunity to do this yet, but geez, I'd really love to at some point, is I love to have somebody who's coming up there to help me out that
Hmm.
I can then teach those ropes to and make those connections for so that there is somebody who can actually at some point, because one of these days I'm going to need to retire. It's not going to be
One of these
now, but
days, you're gonna just have to be the fan and just actually enjoy it.
well, yeah, and the other thing too, and I love this, we did one of the coolest things ever with Sabrina Ekstrom. Talk about throwing a girl from like, sitting safely on a bench into the fire. And we did this, and I'm going to give a huge thank you to there was one person that I messaged and I said, here's what's going to happen, da 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 da. So I'll explain this. We sent Sabrina to the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500 because Indy only issued us one media
Ooh,
credential.
well, wow,
And Sabrina happened to live closest. And Sabrina had never been to a big high profile event before.
yikes!
So she got a recorder and we basically said, okay, you're covering the 100th running of the Indy 500 for us because
Right.
you're the closest one to it. Because I wasn't for one single media pass just for myself. I was like, forget this. I am not going to that. That's, I'm going to have to travel through customs. There's going to be all kinds of
Hmm.
questions. Da, 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 da.
Right.
So anyway, we sent Sabrina there, almost zero experience interviewing people, no idea how to work a paddock, no clue how to work a high profile event. And I said, get your credentials, get into the media center. And then once you're there, you're
Watch.
going to ask for Diane Swintal,
Oh,
who at that
yeah.
time was the PR person for all the Mazda Road to Indy series. I said, you're going to tell her I sent you because I know Diane. And I said, and you're going to, I had already talked to Diane and arranged this with her. And I said, once you've talked to Diane, Diane's going to connect you up with all the women from all the IndyCar and other teams that are there that weekend so that you can get all the
Nice.
interviews done. She came back with 7 interviews,
Wow.
including Pippa Mann, 2 women who were spotting for IndyCar drivers, one of the Mazda Road to Indy drivers who was a woman, like she literally cleaned it out. It was awesome.
Right.
And I was just like, see, this is how it works. And the thing is, we owe that to Diane because Diane was the one who made the connections for her.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
And
all
and
about
that's
sometimes who you know.
it is. This is absolutely motorsport, and working media motorsport is an industry where it is definitely about who you know or who you can find and talk into helping you out.
Right. And
So,
especially in these times here we find ourselves in, now it's almost like what happens now. And I know there's
well,
some stuff announced today by the provincial government the day we're recording this. I
yeah.
think it's the 14th or something or whatever, but they announced today that uh, motorcycle and car racing will be allowed to return, I believe, sometime next week, uh, May 17th,
I think they
something
said
like
May
that.
19th,
19th.
but it has to be done with all the proper social distancing protocols in place, and it has
Right.
to be done with no spectators.
Right. Was
Um,
media like? Because I also noticed media was also included on the list of things that can
yeah,
start
but
going
here's the
again.
thing. At this point, if I got a phone call from somebody with, Canadian Automobile Sport Club saying, hey, we're going to issue you your scrutineer's license. Oh, yeah, I got to apply for that. Anyway, we're going to issue you your scrutineer's license. We need you to come up and scrutineer an event. There'll be no spectators allowed. I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll go do that.
Right.
At this point, though, I would not show up to cover for media wise an event at CTMP.
Right.
Because I don't consider that role to be essential to
Right.
a non, like an event where there's no spectators, whatever, doesn't really matter. Especially not when I imagine that these are probably going to be regional level events if they run any at all, as
Right.
opposed to pro
Yeah.
level. To my way of thinking, I would be an essential personnel as a race official to help run the weekend. I do not see media as being essential for a regional race at this point.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that's just
Well,
me.
you can just give someone a phone and they can do it. Like they're already doing that almost in Victory
Yeah,
Lane, and
yeah.
but at the same time though, like yeah, totally understanding and respecting the guidelines they've given us and the social distancing. That's the most important thing. But
Yeah.
for the people though who are, there's a lot of people that show up for the media. There's a lot of different podcasts and
Hmm.
publications and radio. You just got photogs.
Yeah.
I like saying that, photogs. I don't know, but yeah. So there's a lot of them. I'm wondering what it's like on their end, and you know a
It,
lot of them, and you
yeah.
know,
It depends. I think for the photographers, this is really the hardest thing for them right now because literally they have nothing to shoot.
right,
And they have no way to make money because if they're shooting motorsport, beans and donuts, they're probably shooting other sports as well, most of which are not running right now.
right, yeah,
Like, for example, there's a photographer down in Windsor right now that was like so excited that he got a chance to go out and get a shot of the Blue Angels
same,
flying over
yeah,
Detroit, you know, because that's the fastest moving thing he's been able to shoot in a long
right.
time.
That's how I felt when I was taking photos of the snowbirds and the
Hmm.
warbirds.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing is this is really a difficult time, particularly for the photographers. It's also a difficult time, depending upon the race team, for the engineers, for the crew members.
Right,
There are mechanics right now that have literally no work. This is unexpected.
right,
And the thing is, here's where I have to give it out to iRacing. And yes, I'm going to sound like I'm totally on the iRacing bandwagon, but it's my firm
I am.
belief that without iRacing, motorsport would be dead in the water, well, dead on the track right now. But instead, with iRacing, it's on life support,
Right.
which is better than nothing. And I have to admit, for something that was just a let's dip our toe in this water,
It went pretty big.
it went pretty big and pretty serious pretty
Yeah.
quick. And actually, we did an interview on the show with Kate Gunlack from Aero McLaren SP, which was really cool, by the way. And
Nice.
I said to her, okay, like, how's this work in iRacing for you as an engineer? And she's like, oh man, we're up there right like we would be on the pit wall at a
Right.
real race. We're doing everything we normally would do. And actually the interesting part of that was that she was part of the performance, part of the team that was involved in fielding Robert Wickens in those 6 races.
Neat. Yeah, the setups on iRacing are very complex. They're not easy.
Hmm. And that's just it. None of that is easy. And there's been people who are like, oh, it's not real racing, blah, 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 whatever. I'm only going to watch when it's real racing. I'm like, what you don't seem to get is this is all you're going to get for the time
Right.
being, A. B, this is by and large as close as you can get to the real thing without it being the real thing.
Right.
And C, if you don't support this right now, you might not have an actual race series to watch at the end of this.
Was it Andretti who said it's simulated cars, but it's real racing? Was that the
Yeah.
quote? I believe that was
And
him. Yeah.
somebody said that, yeah. And I mean, there were other there was some disparity even amongst the drivers and the teams that were involved. Some of them took it very lighthearted. It was just
Hmm.
a fun romp and entertaining. Others took it very seriously.
I
And
think Kyle Busch in the Cup Series for NASCAR. I was very surprised that he took it. That's very like he was very serious about it.
well, I mean, you know,
It's Kyle Busch, but
yeah. But I mean, look at Simone Pagenaud.
right.
Right? Simone Pagenaud took that right serious. Now, mind you, he
Yes.
was highly successful. The other guy who took that really seriously, well, the other two guys that took it seriously were also Will Power and Scotty McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Um, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. took it real seriously
I
for the
watched
time
all the
he got to
IndyCar
sit
ones
there.
too. That was great. Like that
That
was a
was
great race.
fantastic.
I was on the edge of my seat cheering for Junior. Like he's gonna actually kind of
And
get
and
a
and then
spot
when
up
they
there.
had Lando Norris showed up for the race at Coda
Right.
and a virtual Coda, and at the end of that race, I'm like, all right, who was the idiot that invited the Formula One kid? And that's the thing. It gave us a lot of
Crossover.
entertainment.
Also,
Exactly. It gave us a lot of entertainment. It gave us a lot of opportunities to have some fun with it. And it gave us something to talk about media wise, because otherwise we'd have been sitting there talking about nothing.
right, yeah,
And if you wonder how far reaching the effect of this pandemic is, consider the fact that Townsend Bell, Paul Tracy, and Lee Diffie were commentating those
that was
iRaces
cool.
like they
Yep.
would real races
Yeah,
and doing it from their homes.
I love Paul Tracy.
Yeah, well, and apparently Townsend Bell can talk anybody into a wall. He's become the new Murray Walker. Um,
they're they got a lot of good guys in that series that were stepping up.
oh yeah. And the thing is, you had Denny Hamlin who went out there and said if he won the race, he was going to donate $5,000 to
Right,
charity.
yeah.
And what happens? He wins the race. There's these neat little things, and the one that absolutely got me was I think it was Zach Veach who stole. He had a throttle spring on his sim rig brake,
Oh,
so he stole a spring from his girlfriend's sewing machine to
huh.
fix the throttle return
Right.
spring. And
Okay.
then he had some other kind of problem, and he wound up taking a saw and hacking up like a hockey puck or something to create a stop bumper that he needed for another part of his rig. And
A
I'm
lot of
like,
homemade stuff.
wow, like you
Yeah.
can't help but be impressed by those cool little bits. And there was absolutely nobody that I talked to that wasn't absolutely thrilled with Robert Wickens being involved in that.
Right. Oh yeah,
And I
I
mean,
love that because it was like, well, he's Canadian and we're this is a Canadian podcast for our American listeners, but like that he's only from Guelph, which is
yeah,
just it's in our region basically, right? So,
yeah,
that was like that's a hometown guy for me and it was
oh
great.
yeah. It was absolutely fantastic. And there was, for me, I was just really, really happy to see Robert have that opportunity. And I know it would have come
Oh
anyway,
yeah,
but not
right.
quite the same way if the pandemic hadn't happened. So,
That was good for
to
him too.
me,
Absolutely.
that was kind of a silver lining in this whole
Yeah.
situation that we're in right now, that, that opportunity presented itself far earlier than it ordinarily would have for Robert. And I mean, the first race he actually got to run in a sim, he went from dead last to finish
Right.
eighth, which was
I
nuts.
think he had a couple of wrecks and a couple of races he was in, but he ended
Yeah.
up, he didn't give up,
No. No, and then he didn't qualify for the big finale, which was like so depressing, along
Right.
with,
Yes. Yeah, that was crappy. Yeah.
Oakville's own, who didn't make it either. And I was like, seriously.
Right.
And that's the
That's
thing.
not too far from here either, right?
No, and what a huge reversal of fortunes between James Hinchcliffe and Robert Wickens on that.
Yeah, because
You know?
it's obviously with Hinchcliffe having his issues last year with the ride and whatnot, and
Hmm.
that's really good for him. And also the Canadian stuff too, because that was on TV and people know about it, and that also could have brought Canadians together as well.
Well, yeah, and what actually made it interesting about that too, from a Canadian perspective, was that you got the opportunity to see someone rise up that ordinarily people probably wouldn't have paid that much attention
hmm
to, which was Dalton Kellett, because he's
Right.
Canadian, and he performed exceptionally well in those I races.
There's a lot of people that are good, even just on the iRacing itself.
Yeah,
A lot of people who started on the iRacing,
yeah,
and now I feel like it's kind of all these older guys have been grandfathered over.
hmm,
I've spoken to some drivers that they they don't touch that stuff unless they had to do some sort of testing in a sim, and then there's some that love it, like they do it in their spare time.
yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, this is the thing, is the iRacing thing has given us something to talk about,
Yeah.
whereas ordinarily we wouldn't have a whole lot to talk about. I mean, particularly for me and my show, there's not been a lot to talk about. And the one thing that we could talk about that was women in motorsport related was the fact that the W series is
I
probably
was
going
about
to
to ask about
survive
that.
this.
Yeah.
And regrettably, we talk about that series, but I've never really been a big fan of it. I had to kind of eat my words on that a little bit when Megan Gilks wound up winning the reverse grid race, though, because that provided an incredible opportunity for that young girl to showcase her
Right.
talent that she ordinarily wouldn't have had. And I was absolutely thrilled for her that she got that win, because they
People
started
had a chance
reversed.
to the
Yeah,
ladies had a chance. to show themselves.
Absolutely. Well, what was interesting is they started that race on the basis of championship points in reverse, which meant Megan started on pole because she had the least number of championship points in the entire series. And she managed, theoretically, the people behind her should have been able to catch up to her and pass her, at least a decent number of them. Yeah, no, there was like all of, I think, 4/10 of a second between her and Alice Powell
Right.
at the checkered flag. And I watched that race, and because I was like, okay, I got to at least watch one of these races before I completely write this off as being stupid. And I watched that race and I kind of went, all right, now I understand the value of this. I didn't
Right.
understand it before, because had it not been for the W Series and had it not been for that reverse grid race, nobody probably would have realized what an incredibly good driver Megan Gilks
Right.
actually is, because she would never have had the opportunity to showcase her talent like that otherwise. So I had to kind of bite my tongue a bit and kind of back up on what I was saying and go, okay, and I do see merit in this.
I had to bite my tongue with that as well. Well, obviously for because I'm a man, I shouldn't say
Yeah.
anything. But the W series originally, I was like, okay, well, aren't they good enough to race in any other series? But as you said, it also gave people a chance to put
Yeah.
themselves on the map, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah. And the other thing too is if you look at some of the women drivers that wound up in that series, like you cannot tell me that Jamie Chadwick is any kind of slouch behind the wheel of any car.
Right.
Period. You cannot tell me that Alice Powell is a slouch behind the wheel of any car, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there were a bunch of women in that series that were selected for it that were seriously good shoes in a race car.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really marvelous to get the opportunity to see them. Am I fond of the idea that they were going head to head against each other instead of head to head against other comers? Not really. Having said that, it is what it is.
Right.
And I'm more behind the Pippa Man concept of why don't we just fund women where they already are?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a whole plethora of very talented women drivers who are seriously underfunded in,
Right.
not good quality equipment, that were they actually given good quality equipment and properly funded would probably frickin' take the boots to
Mm-hmm.
guys. I mean, Jamie Chadwick's a prime example. I mean, she's won a British GT championship title. She has won a Formula 3 title uh, the Middle East.
Wow.
Okay, like she literally pulled off 3 wins in one weekend, which, as all us Canadians know, we call that a hat trick. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Aren't they doing
um,
a virtual series? I had read somewhere that they were going to do a race at like a Le
I
Mans or something like that in the virtual.
Yeah, now see, the W series is actually tracked by my co-host Sue Mason,
Right.
so I don't really pay that much
Right.
attention
Yeah.
to it. I'm the one that keeps track of what happens with, things like IndyCar, IMSA, the odd bit of rally racing, the odd bit of
There,
motorcycle
there hasn't
racing.
been anything from them about pandemic stuff, like what they plan on doing if they return, or are they just in parts of the world where it's like out of question? Some of these
Well,
tracks.
I think there's a lot of stuff that's out of question right now that we may
Yeah.
not necessarily have all accepted as reality yet.
Right.
Interestingly enough, actually, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park this weekend was supposed to be opening their pro season with the Victoria Day Speed Fest. You and I both would have been there for that
Yeah. Yeah.
this coming weekend, but that's not going to happen now. So instead, they have actually put together an e-Speed Fest
I hope I'll
weekend.
be in it.
And yeah, and I actually posted that to our Facebook page and encouraged any of our women drivers who've got iRacing rigs and subscriptions to consider actually trying out for the opportunity to run in the
Right.
feature race there.
Yeah. There's going to be a
And
lot of people
that's,
signing up for that.
yeah, I don't really care. I'm still going to encourage people.
Well, absolutely.
Um,
That's what I did too. Like I even signed up for it. I'm like, hey, let's just fill this up.
yeah, I mean, hey, why not?
Yeah.
So,
It's
I'm
free.
really encouraged by that one because now we have an actual racetrack, a motorsport venue
And it's a
that
good
has put
scan.
together an event.
It's a good scan on iRacing. It's a few years ago. It doesn't have the media center. I think it was right before.
Yeah.
But it's like it's weird driving past that. It's like what? In the virtual
Oh,
world,
it's got
how?
the old Turn 10.
Yeah,
Ah, yes, when the Castrol Tower was
and
still up.
and I think there's still grass out in
Oh,
two or three, right?
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of things that have
And I
changed
think
about
there's a
that
lot of
track in the
the
last
kitty
few
litter in Moss
years.
Corner still. I know they still have some there. I believe a bit there,
I'm
but
trying to remember if I think White's Island is still there, but you can no longer do the shortcut
okay.
to get
Haven't
into pit
tested
lane.
it.
Yeah, you don't want to. Well, okay, so the pit, let's talk specifics of Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. So turn 10, there was the pit entrance, and then there was White's Island, which was this little piece of grass, and then there was an area with no wall where you could,
Right.
if you missed the pit entrance, you could do a shortcut past White's Island into pit lane.
Oh wow. Okay.
You can no longer do that because they actually built the pit wall all the way down.
Right. Yeah.
And it was really comical if you were a flagger working turn 10 because every once in a while you would hear control 10, no flag. Yeah, go ahead 10. Yeah, car number, blah, blah, blah. Shortcut White's Island.
Okay. Right.
Because you weren't supposed to do that. That was
No.
considered a dangerous pit entry.
Did they have to yield or something like that, or come back down the
No, they
next
have to
lap?
go back around and come in the next lap.
Right.
You can't just shortcut your entry to pit lane. Come
Right.
on.
Yeah. No.
Wall or no wall, you should
Interesting
act
though.
like
I,
there is
I
one.
I didn't know about that. Interesting.
I wouldn't advise trying that if you actually can still do that shortcut in iRacing.
I'm
Don't do
sure
it.
they probably would have patched that because someone probably did do it.
Oh, either they patched it or they haven't patched it yet. In which case, whoever the race director is probably going to do the slap the back of your hand and go, don't
Yeah.
do that.
Well,
So
the second, our friend Adam Ross, the
yeah,
commentator of the Pinty series on TSN,
yeah,
he shared it, and within a minute, I was like, let's sign this, like, let's get this filled out right now, and it's free.
yeah.
So, and I believe it's the Canadian Sim Racing League, and I believe it's sponsored by LaCroix Tuning.
Yes, that is involved. There's also the Wayfair Insurance
Right.
GT deal. And then there's a NASCAR Pinty's Invitational. There's a whole bunch of
I think there's a
stuff.
radical because I've seen the radical
Yeah.
guys. They were practicing in lobbies, and I ended up talking to a fella, and I'm like, hey, I probably ended up taking a few pictures of you at some point in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean there are some cool stories from some of the different drivers already involved. Like let's face it, fan favorite Daniel Morad. You can't lose with him. You
Hmm.
just can't. Because, I mean, he's colorful. He's awesome. We love Dan. Daniel's a sweetheart. I love Daniel. Yes, Daniel, I actually said that publicly. Don't kill me. Um, there's guys like Scott Hargrove, Zach Robichon, um, Stefan Radzinski, that are kicking around out there. Sure as crap, I'm betting we'll see one or two of them show up
Hmm.
for, one of these races on the weekend. You got if the radical guys are going to be running, good bet you'll see Austin Riley,
Right.
right?
It'll
He's
be a
got a
good
sim,
race then. Like if all these
yeah.
guys are going to be there, like.
And I mean that Austin Riley went out, got a radical to compete in Radical Cup for 2020, and then the pandemic hit, so that car's been sitting
Hmm.
there waiting. And in the meantime, he's got a sim rig, so
These
why
guys
not?
are itching to go.
Yeah, I mean you got a bunch of well, there's three guys named Whitmer floating around out there.
Oh yeah.
Kuno, Nick, and Carl. Is Kuno, Nick, and Carl? Yeah, Kuno, Nick, and Carl. There's four Whitmer brothers all together, and one of them's a mechanic. The other three are race car drivers. Go figure.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot
It
of
should be a good weekend.
opportunities. I'm excited
Yeah.
for it because now it's giving me something to do on my May 2-4 weekend other than sit around the house and watch Mandarin language dramas with subtitles. So, hey, but yeah, no, it's this pandemic has been a weird thing. I don't know that I'd say it's good for motorsport overall, but what I will say is it's created some very interesting situations
Oh
that you
yeah.
normally wouldn't see. Like for example, there's a whole bunch of guys that are coming to people's attention as a result of iRacing that you normally wouldn't hear about.
Right. Exactly.
Um, there is money still flowing into the series. There is some opportunities for employment and for, income for some
Shows
folks
the
involved in
potential
the
of what it
series.
could be. Like I always said they should have been doing that anyways. All the Cup guys in NASCAR, all these guys doing
Mhm.
stuff. I even think they did an IROC, a couple of IROC races too, just
Yeah.
because like that's awesome. Like IROC came back. They were racing at North Wilkesboro last week. Like what? A lot of those old school fans that are always, there's a lot of old school fans that complain, obviously, and well,
Yeah.
here's the chance that we got to bring it back one way or another, and it has to be virtually, but
And hey, Sammy Swindell got to win an A main in a World of Outlaws race. How
right.
cool is that? Considering he can't drive a car in real life.
And it gives a lot of people, like, even just think about Wickens as well.
Exactly.
Like that's amazing that he was able to get a sim, a rig, and he was able to hop on the sim just like that.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the thing is that it's not so much just the I although I gotta be honest with you, the iRacing thing is for me it's completely cool. I love it. But it's not so much that really I find um, the silver lining in. I think what I'm finding the silver lining in is the fact that it did not take long for our sport to adapt.
Right. No, it was like the first weekend, almost like it was everything was
Yeah,
suspended.
like that's just it. It did not take long. It was probably a whopping what, 2 weeks
Hmm.
before they turned around and had plans in place. And like I said, initially it was the NASCAR Pro Invitational, that first one where they kind of dipped their toe in the water, and then man, that got serious
Yeah.
right quick. And
Even
it's
though it
just
was a
the
caution fest, but
but I mean it was really, or it is really heartening to me to see that our sport can adapt in times like this, and not just in terms of doing things like shifting to iRacing and building that up, but also the level of ingenuity and the
hmm
level of knowledge sharing that is occurring from Formula One teams on down in response to the pandemic, from everything from helping to create reusable, recyclable
oh
face
yeah,
shields
yeah,
to helping to streamline manufacturing processes for ventilators.
because a lot of them have the stuff in house that can make that.
And let's be honest, you take all 7 Formula 1 teams that are sitting in the United Kingdom right now, and you take the engineering brain power sitting there
Yeah,
in
you
those
can.
offices,
Yeah, yeah.
there's a lot you can do with it. And that's the part I found amazing is that, they're on furlough right now. They got nothing to do. So what
hmm
do? They decide to turn around, step up, and go, hey, show us how you're making these. Maybe we can find a way to manufacture them quicker.
Right.
And not only are they lending engineering expertise, but they're also lending their own manufacturing facilities to it. That's happening in the United States. It's happening here in Canada. It is happening over in Europe. It's happening around the world.
hmm
And we need to give credit where credit is
Right.
due to
We haven't heard
our,
much credit to that. The
yeah,
actual people in the shops.
I mean, our sport right now is stepping up in 2 ways. Number one, we're providing entertainment. Number two, we're helping to
Hmm
provide the necessary medical equipment to get the job done.
Right.
And we're positioned perfectly to do both of those things. And it's just absolutely incredibly heartening to me to see how flexible we're able to be in the face of something like this as a sport.
And I've noticed it as well, even just with things kind of getting back into the routine this
Hmm.
weekend. Like, I mean, there's a somewhere in Germany, it's like football's coming back or whatever, but a lot of motorsport stuff, obviously, with the Cup Series coming back, and
Hmm.
some of the stuff that we found out from them. They're running a race on a Wednesday night. They've been talking for years about running a midweek race, obviously under
Hmm.
different circumstances here, but we're gonna just maybe start seeing some other things that some of these series have been talking about for years.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, because we still need to be flexible and we still need to be
Right.
creative, even as we're able to go back to real racetracks and do it again in the analog world. We still need to be very flexible and very creative about how we achieve those things.
hmm
And I'm also going to put forward the theory that I have a sneaking feeling that iRacing is probably going to remain with a much higher profile
Oh
now,
yeah,
even after we get back to analog racing, than it had
yeah.
before this pandemic hit.
And a
So,
lot of people have, obviously a lot of people aren't working the last few weeks. I have spent I'm it's a sad like, to admit this. I've probably spent at least about 50 hours just in the last few weeks on iRacing, and there's
mhm.
a lot of people that, they're at home. Some of them though it's frustrating. Some of them I don't feel like they should be on they should be on iRacing, or maybe they should be in like their own separate little demolition derby lobby maybe, but
Yes,
um
Colleen's infamous question in the one NASCAR race: how bad of a driver do you have to be to get black flagged and parked in a
Yeah, right.
sim?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And some of it's like, yeah, some of them should have just stayed off it, but it's still cool to see that.
Yeah,
Not only that, iRacing is, they're gonna they're gonna make it, like as you said, we're gonna correlate this to the analog world, hopefully.
yeah,
And
and I think that we're gonna see when we come out of this, we're gonna see a real shift in the sport in several ways. And I don't regard that as a bad thing. I think the biggest challenge to that is going to be the fact that we still, she says, have a diehard collection of people who, well, that's the way we did it in the 70s. We should still be doing it that way.
right,
Good for you.
right,
Piss off. Piddle off. Go away. Go raffle yourself. And this is going to be the biggest challenge, is that we're going to come out of this as a sport looking different than we did before this happened. Fact.
oh yeah,
Reality. And it's going to be a hard adjustment for people who are stuck in that mindset of not wanting the sport to change. Um,
do you
and
think
I
that
mean,
means like no shoulder to shoulder attendance kind of thing?
I think it's going to be a long, long time before we see something like that.
Right,
I
yeah,
mean, from a personal perspective for me, I'll start going out to restaurants and bars again once there are judges sitting back on the bench and I can walk into a Service Ontario office and get service face to
right,
face.
yeah,
Because if that's not happening, there's no way I'm going to a bar or restaurant. That's not going to happen. And I mean, this is the thing, is that it's, everybody's got to make their own decisions on these things. Um, and I know where I sit and
mm-hmm.
what my decisions are. And I'm not saying anybody else should use the same decision making process I have. But keep in mind that, in my real life, when I'm not recording radio shows, I work grocery retail. I'm considered an essential worker. I make sure people have food. And the last few weeks in that industry have been exceptionally challenging for
Oh yeah,
everybody working in it. Very, very difficult. And unfortunately, in some ways, it's gotten easier. But in other ways, it's become more challenging, as some people are just still refusing to accept the reality of where we are right now. And I think that translates over into motorsport too. We're not very good at adapting to change, and we're not very good at adapting to sudden drastic change,
right,
which is why I give motorsport full credit for having become so flexible that they adapted so quickly in this case and kept it going.
yeah,
It's
totally,
huge what they did. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the effects. It's from a media perspective for us, it's really difficult because there's just so little to talk about.
right.
So I'm hunting down things here and there. We had Aurora Strauss on the show a few weeks back. We had Christina Lamb on the show as well. We had Kate Gunlack on talking about, the whole thing with IndyCar. Um, this coming week's going to be a fun show because we've decided we're going to move over to talk about airplanes. So,
Nice. The
yeah,
the
we have
Warbirds.
the group from Waterloo Warbirds is going to be joining us on the show to talk about, what they do, why they do it, talk some technical about their planes that they have. And they're also going to talk to us about what it took to plan the tribute flyover that they did this past Tuesday.
Interesting.
Which is going to be really, really cool because that's not the easiest thing going. And I'm hoping at some point that we can potentially, and I'm going to leave this for down the road, but potentially get somebody from the Snowbirds on the show to talk about the flyovers they've been doing. Because regardless of what anybody else thinks, that's been a mammoth job for them.
Right. Yeah, those, even obviously we have American listeners, maybe they've seen the Bluebirds.
The Blue Angels
The
and
Blue
the
Angels, sorry.
the
The
yeah, and the
Bluebirds.
Air Force Thunderbirds. And don't kid yourself. These guys are doing the equivalent, and I'll just say this much because I know this is fact. These guys are doing the equivalent of an air show every day with no days off between, and then turning around and doing the equivalent
Right.
of an air show the following day. And they are doing this consistently. And the big political argument, I'll get into this just for a second because to me it's worth talking about. The big political argument is that it's a waste of money to put these planes up in the air when we so badly need PPE and
Mm-hmm.
funding for ventilators and stuff. But here's the problem. These are military aircraft, and these are military pilots. And pandemic or no pandemic, these guys have to get up in the
Yeah.
air and have to fly a certain number of hours in order to keep their credentials. Otherwise, they're not operationally ready and no longer qualified to fly.
Right.
So they're going
That.
to have to
Yeah.
fly regardless. The budget was already there. They were intending to be at a bunch of air shows. And in the case of the Canadian Forces Snowbirds, they were quite blunt about the fact that it didn't matter if they did this tour or not. They would still be up flying. The only difference would be they'd be buzzing a bunch of farmers in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and to be honest with you, when I got to see them fly over Waterloo Region on Mother's Day, that was kind of cool. And I picked a great spot to watch
Absolutely.
them because where I watched them from, I got to watch them flying around for a whopping 3 minutes.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I only got
whereas
to see
most
him for a
people
little bit,
just
but
get 30 seconds as they
yeah.
go flying overhead. We got 3 minutes and a bunch of maneuvers and everything else from the spot we picked. So, it's cool. But yeah, we're going to talk planes because aviation plays a role in inspiring us as much as iRacing and
Right.
motorsport does.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
in my head, okay, I'm a motorsport show, but come on, a jet fighter, a jet plane's got an engine and it goes fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I need more than that?
That
No.
should. I think it's important for all these other podcasts and shows and whoever, even people who write for the
Mm,
magazines or their online websites or whatever. It's important for them just to. I've noticed a lot of them are saying, especially here in Canada, a lot of them are going to start doing some stuff this weekend or within the next couple of weeks, starting to get some sort of ball rolling. But for us in Canada, though, I mean, not just personally looking down at the people in the States, I wonder how the media is going to work down there. But up here, though, I mean, yeah, we're gonna have to sit at home for a little bit.
hmm And I mean, it's tricky. It's difficult.
Yeah.
This whole thing is difficult, and realistically, we're kind of paddling our way forward into a bunch of unknowns.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because we don't have enough medical information. We don't have treatment options other than drastic measures at this point. We don't have a grip on,
It's almost still too
you know,
early to even say.
yeah, I mean, we don't have a grip on transmission methods and how to reduce that anymore. So, because ironically, the measures they're having us take now are the same measures they implemented 101 years ago with the Spanish flu.
Interesting.
So, we don't really, and this is one of the things I've heard the odd person say is, I thought medicine had advanced enough that this could never happen again.
Right.
Well, here
Yeah.
we are. And that's the thing is we're navigating uncharted waters in a lot of ways, so we don't have any real idea how this is all going to work going
Right.
forward. We're just kind of guessing at it. Um, and I think because we're all taking guesses at it, it's more challenging because the guesses kind of create expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Expectations can then be
You're right.
disappointed,
Exactly. Yep.
right?
You almost don't want to
Um,
be too hopeful, in a way.
well, I want to be hopeful, but I don't
Right.
want to be hopeful to the point where if I don't get my expectations met, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
be disappointed, right? Um, I mean, I'm kind of looking at this in a lot of ways and kind of going, I'm just going to do this thing day by day as it comes.
Right. And we're all in this in the same boat almost.
Well, no, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm.
Yeah, yeah. Because some
Some
of us
people
are
have
in
much
different
bigger
boats, I guess.
boats.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right? And
Fancier boats, nicely furnished boats.
here's the other thing to realize is that those of us that are involved in motorsport have already lived a very privileged life that very few people get to be involved in.
Right, right.
Um, and although we consider ourselves an open club, not everybody is aware of our existence. Not
Hmm.
everybody is aware of how to become involved. Not everybody wants to be
Right,
involved.
yeah.
So you're talking about a very privileged group of people when you're talking about the motorsport community. And when I say the motorsport community, I am including in that all disciplines, rally, nav
Oh, yeah.
rally, autocross guys, rally cross, anything on two wheels, drag, paved oval, dirt oval. You know, I don't care if you're racing something, you're racing something.
Yeah.
If you're racing boats, good for you, because that's
Yeah.
part of motorsport. If you're
Exactly.
racing snowmobiles, good for you. That's part of motorsport. If you're racing lawnmowers, awesome. I really
Yeah.
want to see that, by the way.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
fun.
you know, and if you're racing planes,
Hmm.
okay, cool. I want to see that too,
Right.
right? Because to me, motorsport is this overarching thing with all these different disciplines. And every single discipline can bring something to the table in the middle of a situation like this to help
Right.
make it better.
Yeah. There's a lot of versatility too. Kind of what we've kind of been talking about this whole
Mm-hmm.
podcast is a lot of us have to adapt to maybe talking about different things. And even this is
Mm-hmm.
why I wanted to do a series of episodes. I've reached out to some people and I'd like to speak to them and get their perspective on this because a lot of this is unknown and a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
have been kind of not been doing much the last couple months. And I don't know what's the trend. I don't know what started the trend of people kind of wanting to start things back up again. But we're even just this discussion here of a pandemic for a motorsports podcast. That's even wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very rare that we would on the show be talking about something that had squat bugger to
Right.
do with racing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it would have a significant impact. There was very little outside that had an impact on motorsport.
Right.
This has most definitely had an impact on motorsport. It's one of the rare things that has. And that makes it very precedent setting. And it also means that we're navigating something that's almost uncharted.
Hmm.
Because the last time um, that we were in the position we were in now, where events were being canceled, was World War II.
Right. And there's probably multiple reasons. There's more than one reason for that, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, think about the fact that we haven't had some races not hold an event since World War II.
Right. Yeah. There's just to think like obviously people were forced to go to war, and then
Yeah,
there's the oil
and
issue,
that's
and
that's nigh on 75 years ago,
right. Yeah.
because we just celebrated the 75th anniversary of victory in Europe this past week,
Right.
right? So,
And
I
we find
mean,
ourselves in almost a similar situation now.
yeah, and that's the thing, is this is completely unprecedented for us because, I mean, shit, yeah, they ran the Bathurst 12 hour this year with a frickin' half the country on fire,
Right. Yeah.
and that didn't stop them from racing.
Right.
And we it's almost unheard of for us to not race. There's almost nothing we
Hmm.
won't do to race, right?
And I think a
And
lot of
so,
people, social distancing is important, whether people agree with it or not. I think everyone should. I don't think it's arguable. I think everyone should be on board with respecting. I respect what the health officials are saying. Where
mhm.
we live in Ontario, specifically, it's different from maybe where some of our listeners are living from. Maybe
Yeah,
obviously, it's a little bit more. It seems like it's a bit more free down south, and they're going to probably open
well,
up a little bit more sooner than we will.
I yes and no. I think it depends on what state you're in, because state to state the restrictions are different from what
Yes.
I've been gathering.
Yeah.
Whereas here in Ontario, my feeling is that actually we have a significant amount of freedom. I had two weekly activities that currently I can't participate in as a result of the pandemic. Well, three if you count motorsport, but
Mhm.
motorsport wasn't like a weekly activity.
Mhm.
One of them was getting together for a game night with a bunch of my friends every week. We play Dungeons and Dragons. We're geeks. I've rolled once. I have feet. Uh, the other one is that I also do target shooting with a hunting bow and arrows.
Right.
And I was doing that in an indoor range, and the indoor range is shut down right now.
Mhm.
So that's really, apart from the
Unless
fact
you
that going to,
golf, I guess you're
yeah,
good for this weekend.
yeah, I mean, grocery stores are kind of a pain in the butt. Everything else that you want to buy is pretty much a case of getting prepared for the fact that everything is just that much more difficult, and that much slower to get,
Mhm.
regardless of what it is. Um, I, you know, I mean, I understand the need for precautions, and I've been taking them at my work. We wear gloves. We glove up. We sanitize the heck out of everything.
Hmm.
I'm required to wear a mask when I work on the floor at work now. Um, that's been the norm for a few weeks. Now, I will admit I don't tend to wear a mask as often when I'm not at work, probably because I'm so tired of wearing it all day at work.
Yeah.
But I do carry a mask with me in the car, and if I walk into a grocery store and the mask is in the car, I'll slip the mask on,
It sucks
while
wearing
I'm in the
glasses
grocery
with a
store.
mask because it basically fogs up your glasses, and then
Well,
I
there's a
can't
trick
see.
to doing that. There's a
Oh
trick to
yeah.
doing that, yeah. Basically, you kind of really fit the mask tight over your nose and then put the glasses over the mask,
Okay.
and they
Right.
don't fog up as much. Says the woman who wears a mask 6 hours a day and doesn't have glasses that fog up. And
Okay.
I haven't treated them with anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to put
So,
that crap on my glasses anyways, but
yeah, no, me neither.
yeah, like
Really would not.
I think about it, and on the motorsports side of things, like as media, yeah, I mean, even if we wanted to go back this weekend, yeah, like what are we gonna do? What's eh, what is there gonna be there accommodation wise? Well,
Yeah, like
like
come on, have you been in the media? You've been in the media center at
absolutely. I
CTMP on
love
like
my lasagna.
NASCAR truck weekend. Seriously, you're lucky if you get like 2.5 feet of space
Right.
between you and the guy sitting next to you.
That too. Yeah, and that's
Now,
another thing.
so
It's is now this is obviously not all official. I mean, like this is just
mm,
speculation, but we'll be able to judge what's going to happen with this with down in the states with the Cup Series, and
mhm.
I think we're gonna. I would like to see how the media will play down there. But yeah, yeah, definitely. But judging off of what it's like up here at CTMP, yeah, there's no way you can properly socially distance. Not that there's anything wrong with the media center, but you can't. How are we going to interview people? Are they just gonna? Is it just going to be press conference style? Um, Person at a table. We're on the
Mhm.
other side of like we're literally on the back end of the room.
Well, not even that, but how
Like
are crew guys going to work on a car when one
right,
of them has to hold the part in place while the other one's taking it off,
yeah,
right? Like it's not. There are and these are things we never had to think about before, but now
hmm
we're going to have to think about them. The other thing is, and I kind of shared this one online already, is that if we were to hold a regional amateur race weekend at CTMP with no spectators, which isn't hard for us to do, we're going to be an immediate nice target for a compliance check,
right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
because why wouldn't they when they know we're
Yeah.
there?
Not that they want to pick on NASCAR, and I've gotten shit for
And
being
not
a
that they want to
NASCAR
pick on
fan, but
racing, but let's face it,
yeah,
a big event like that, that's a no-brainer for them to do a
right.
compliance check. That's easy.
And that's the last thing that they would want, and
And the last thing anybody wants is for a compliance check to happen and then we get in trouble and then we can't do it anymore. So I don't know what the answers to
yeah.
any of these questions are. That's a pay grade way the crap above mine.
Yeah, yeah, and I wonder if they even know too. And I think it's all safe to say right now it's no go. Like absolutely, like the way our government's dealing with it, our provincial government's dealing with it. I like the way it's being dealt with to an
Yeah.
extent, but with how we're moving with stages. I mean, like
Hmm.
the stage, or we're about to enter the stage one. It's I'll respect it. And who knows
Yeah.
what will be if we're going to be in stage two or three, when we're going to be able to actually have an event. Maybe it
Yeah.
could be the fall. Maybe it could be a September CTMP
Hey,
event.
I
That
got news for you. Racing calendars for September, October, and
be,
November, I have a feeling are going to be really
yeah,
freaking packed.
I'm going to be ready.
I will share one thought I just had with you as we were talking. With the stage one, the way that they put that requirement in place that they've announced that opens up for May 19th. While I don't think it's conducive to holding actual motorsport competition events that are sanctioned, I think it's very conducive to doing things like
Testing and
lapping
practice.
days,
Okay, yeah,
testing,
sure.
well, not even testing or practice, but lapping days,
Right,
and like track event days for, guys that want to go out there and do whatever with their Porsche.
right,
And
yeah.
to be honest with you, I really wish that moron they caught doing 309 and his stupid brother on the
Yeah,
QEW there,
that a couple
309K.
weeks ago, right?
Yeah, oh, I would so love to see that those two clowns end up at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park in the passenger seat of an actual real race car with
Oh,
one of my
it's
real honest to God drivers. Because I guarantee you at the end of the hot lap, they'll be getting out of the car crying for mama. Because my guys know how to do it, you know?
yeah, yeah. They only took me around in the pace car, and we didn't have any helmet or head and neck restraint.
Mm.
So the guy told me I can't open this up. But we went fast enough, though. I think I went up to 216 kilometers an hour going down. I think we were about to like hit the nice part of the backstretch Andretti straightaway, and
I went
it was sweet. It was very
trying to
sweet.
think. It
I
was
think I
many,
cried
many
a bit.
years ago. Oh, yeah, you would. It was many, many years ago at a private driving school that I actually was officiating, helping out at, volunteering at. And the head instructor for that weekend was Desiree Wilson. And at the end of the day, they borrowed the one guy's tricked out Volkswagen Jetta VR6. It was a manual transmission car. Actually, my buddy still got that car, which is really funny. There are a whole bunch of stories with
Nice.
that car. Yeah, the one girlfriend he broke up with caught the thing on fire, but we won't go there.
Yikes.
Well, that's what happens when you don't release the emergency brake and you drive. Anyway, Desiree Wilson was taking all of us that had helped out on the weekend out for hot laps at CTMP with light snow falling in November
Yikes. Wow.
in this car. And so I got to do a hot lap around there, and she wasn't holding back.
Wow.
And
Yeah, I
that,
would have.
that car was chipped and everything else. It was extremely capable. The one thing I do very specifically remember from the laps, because I think she took me around for 3 laps in total. The one thing I very specifically remember about this is going into 5A at Mosport or at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. And I knew she was braking because logically you have to brake.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Damned if I could feel it.
Right.
And I'm not kidding. She was so smooth that I couldn't actually feel that she was
Really.
touching the brake pedal.
Wow.
I knew logically she had to be, but she wasn't you couldn't feel it. Any turn on the track didn't matter. I could never tell once that she was on the brake pedal. She was that smooth. And that was when I was like, yeah, I don't need to put any performance parts on my car. I need to learn how to drive my car better.
Right.
So, and that's the thing is you have those opportunities and those give you those grand realizations
Yeah.
of whatever. But
Yeah.
those kinds of driving schools, those kinds of lapping day events, that's the kind of thing I can see us getting back to first.
For the first stage, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
I don't.
there wasn't a lot of specification on. All it said was whatever sanctioning body or whatever club is
Yeah.
responsible for it can do whatever. Really, there wasn't anything specific.
Yeah, I mean, legitimate sanctioned motorsport competition events like races, both motorcycle and car, I can't see at this point.
Right.
I
No.
can see lapping days, I can see driver school days, I can see, performance whatevers. I can see being able to do some of those corporate events again.
Right.
But that's about all I can see at the moment. So,
Obviously, one would hope for testing or practice or whatever.
yeah, sure.
But yeah, so you got your own show
Yeah,
as well that we're talking about. You've also updated people on stuff as much as you can.
yeah,
You're doing something with the Warbirds
yeah.
from Waterloo. Where can you access this? Do you have a
Um,
social media?
Yeah, it's Heels on Wheels radio program on Facebook. We do have a Twitter account, but it's kind of dead in the water at the moment because we've been having some challenges with trying
Twitter
to.
is such a
Well, we've had a long-term challenge trying to decouple it from the Facebook page so we could actually make it more interactive.
right.
And we still haven't managed to figure out how to
Yeah, I've
do
had
that.
to
We're gonna
Google
have
that
to.
stuff a few times, and it's
Yeah,
frustrated me.
it drives me a bit crazy.
Yeah.
But it's Heels on Wheels radio program on Facebook. There's also Performance Motorsports Network on Facebook, which is the network that broadcasts our show. There's also performancemotorsportnetwork.com, which is where there's a listen live link so you can listen live to the show. There are also all kinds of other options. Plus, we do, after our broadcast run finishes, 7 days after debut, we put the show up on archive.org so people can actually listen to it as a podcast
Right.
afterwards.
Nice.
And just following along with our Facebook page will provide all kinds of information. And I mean, we've done some really interesting stuff. We had somebody from Male Allies with the Waterloo Region Sexual Assault Support Center on our show
Oh
talking
wow.
about sexual harassment and sexual assault in motorsport. Believe it or not, that's a thing.
Oh, I could. Unfortunately, sometimes you could assume those things, and that's a
Yeah.
terrible assumption. I know. Yeah, I always wonder what
Yeah.
they go through because I have a
Yeah.
feeling it gets nasty, and that's not
But
good.
that's actually a thing. So we had
Yeah.
a whole conversation with somebody about that and about, how important it is to recognize that in the motorsport culture. We did that
Yeah.
before. We've had Mark Boudreau on from Motorsport Prospects talking about ladder systems and the key points that we're missing when we're working our kids up through the ladder system. Which was a fascinating conversation. We're going to have him back on again at some point in the not too distant future because he's revamping what Motorsport Prospects is about and what it's doing. Um, excuse me. We've done a whole bunch of stuff. Uh,
Yeah, it's good to have other people around. Like I
yeah,
mean, we happen to live in the same
yeah,
region of Waterloo
yeah.
and
I just
Southern
happen to live on
Ontario.
the south end. You live on the north end.
Yeah, I'm by Fairview Park Mall, just up by Highway 8 there. So,
Oh yeah, well I okay. You could throw a stone and hit me because I'm actually
uh-oh.
the other side of the 401. So,
But like that's cool though,
but,
because we make our missions too, and like this would be, as you said earlier on in the show, this would have been our weekend where we would have made the trek, like get up
yeah.
nice and early, like 3 a.m. in the morning, and make sure you
Oh,
get to
you
most
might have
sport.
gotten up at 3 a.m. I'm a little old for that stuff now. Come
Oh
on.
man, because I want to try to get there for the photographers meeting, and sometimes traffic. One time it took us like crazy. It was like a ridiculous amount of time where it took us and we were late, and another time it was like wow, I can't believe we got there that fast.
Yeah,
So it's like you never know with
it's
the traffic, right?
well, it's a bit of a tricky thing to get from here to there because it's about 2.5
On
hour
Victoria
drive
Day
up
weekend,
to
going through
CTMP.
Toronto and Mississauga, and
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. You want to go through at 3 a.m. in that case. See,
yeah,
I was
right, yeah,
leaving Friday night going up because I'd work here Friday during the day. Anyway, the Waterloo Warbirds is going to be an interesting one because it's a little bit outside of our regular wheelhouse.
right,
But we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna talk to them about what they are as an organization, what they do, what they're there for. We're going to talk with them about their fleet and what they've got. We're going to talk with them about all the steps that got put together in order to create the tribute flyover that they did. And we're going to talk about, their role as ambassadors for Waterloo Region to the rest of the world. Because they're doing a lot of interesting stuff. They're a completely volunteer organization. That tribute flight they did, not funded by any
right.
government agency, completely private money to do that tribute flight
Yeah,
with the
it's
Mako
almost
Shark and
like
the Harvard.
we didn't hear a lot from the local news sources other than just the day it was gonna went like look up literally I think it was just look up in the skies on Tuesday or whatever morning it was.
Well, they were late putting out the press release for it. I think they put the press release out about probably 3 or 4 days. They put it out
Right.
last week, late last week, and it got a little confusing because people started to confuse what the Waterloo
Yeah.
Warbirds were going to be doing with the fact that the snowbirds were
Right.
coming.
Yeah.
Um, and in fact, they were taking a little bit of the compliments and flack for the snowbirds flyover, which was really ironic because they have nothing to
That's
do with the
weird.
snowbirds.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's the interesting part of it. And I think from that perspective of the fact that these guys put together this tribute flyover over Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, and Guelph on their own with their own money, simply because they could and because they felt it would be a good thing to do. It's an incredible story of
Right.
its
Oh
own.
yeah.
And then, it wound up coming at a time that, in fact, the reason they took the Harvard to Guelph was because Guelph was the home of one of the
Oh
six
okay.
members of the crew in the helicopter that crashed on the NATO mission
Oh,
or
okay.
NATO
Right.
exercise off of
Yeah.
Greece. So they deliberately flew the Harvard over Guelph to pay tribute to that,
Okay.
that
Because
loss.
it was like seeing that take off too was really cool.
Well, the Harvard's kind of,
I've seen it before, but it's always cool to see it, right?
it's unmistakable. That Pratt& and
Yeah.
Whitney engine makes some really specific
Yeah.
noise. And the Mako Shark is very distinctive as well because, well, it's got one of the
It's
coolest
like a
liveries in
Cold
the
War
world.
era jet
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah, it's a 1960s era Canadair
Yeah.
T-33, and he's got it painted up like a blue shark.
Yeah.
And I think he said he flew it over Waterloo region doing about 200 miles an hour.
That would have
Um,
been fun.
which was interesting, but okay, that jet's capable of far more.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a really, really cool one. My son actually grabbed a beautiful picture of the Mako shark. He was standing on the rail bridge down in the Grand River just off Freeport.
Isn't that the bra bridge or whatever that they put the
Uh,
bras on for cancer awareness, breast
it
cancer
might
awareness?
be, might be. But yeah, it's not it's the rail bridge next to the actual bridge that you drive over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And anyway, his,
Yikes.
his comment to me was, that guy came out of nowhere and flew straight over top of me. And I was like,
Yikes.
uh,
Yeah,
uh-huh.
I know they asked people not to go down to the airport, but
There were a lot of people that did actually.
guilty.
Yeah.
But I got fantastic shots of them taking off to the point where they actually reached out to me and they're like, "Those are fantastic. Those are terrific photos. Like, thank you."
Yeah.
It's like, wow, like that was even cool of them even reaching out. And I said, "Thank you for taking your time and reaching out and appreciating
Oh, and they've been
photos."
very, very interactive, and a lot of people that
Right.
didn't even realize the warbirds were here, like me. I admit it, I'm guilty of not really. I knew they were around because every once in a while I'd see one. I live in the flight path for the
Right.
airport, so every once in a while
Me
I'd see
too.
one. Just like I'd see that group of four
Yep.
Harvards that's actually out of Tilsonburg.
Right.
The demo team that's out in Tilsonburg, they're a private team as well. And that's the thing is, in the local area here, we have the Waterloo Warbirds, we have the demo team for the Harvards in Tilsonburg, and of course we have the famous one of only two left flying in the world, Vera, the Lancaster bomber down in Hamilton.
And that I think is that the one that has like the Soviet stuff on it.
No,
Okay. Do we have a plane that is
no.
like? I thought we had one that was
And that might
stolen
be,
or
well,
captured.
no, well, the Waterloo Warbirds do have a MiG.
Right. Okay.
Um, from what I understand, they do have a MiG because they're Cold War era aircraft, and nobody says it has to be our side.
Oh yes. Okay, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yep.
Yeah, I think that
Yep.
could be because the Lancaster bombers are World War II, and in fact, my great uncle Joe was actually a Lancaster bomber pilot in World War II. So it was kind of interesting. And anytime I get the chance to see Vera, or the one that's over in the United Kingdom that's airworthy is Thumper. Anytime I get the chance to see either one of them is really cool. And that's the thing is we're talking motorsport, right? Motorsport's really about speed. Basically, you're turning money into noise and speed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so from where I sit, planes definitely come into that
Well, that
because
and I think they do get some. They should get some recognition, and that we are obviously we both are in the region, and
yeah,
we have a show where we could publicly talk about it, and I think it would be nice to give them some props. And I do look forward to that
yeah,
episode. When is that?
yeah.
When do you think that's gonna drop?
We're gonna drop that. It'll debut at 11 p.m. a week from today, so next
Nice.
Thursday.
Some
Yeah.
late night listening.
Yeah, so and it's probably going to take the whole show because I think we're going to skip even talking about news because really at this point I don't care about Formula One. Um,
Hmm. Well,
yay, Vettel's leaving Ferrari.
oh yeah, that's right. That was just a
Shocker.
couple days ago. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't really care. Daniel Ricciardo's doing his own thing and Carlos Sainz is replacing Vettel. Yay. Okay, moving along. Um, I haven't been excited about Formula One in a long time. I was a diehard Formula One fan, but that was back in like the late '90s, early
Before they
2000s.
ruined the cars.
Well, oh
At
my
least they're
God, that
safer,
thing
right? But
screams to the point where it's going to pierce my ears. That's when
yeah,
I was a Formula One
yeah,
fan. And the thing is, I've been around racing so long that, I mean, I remember the days of watching literally live right in front of me at the Canadian Grand Prix, people like James Hunt, Jackie Stewart, the big name legendary guys.
yeah. A lot of
And
people should know that those people raced at most sport.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know they did because the assistant chief steward for the Formula One Grand Prix at Motorsport was my father.
Wow.
Oh yeah,
Well, you
yeah.
didn't you say you were basically
Former
like born
Formula
there?
One steward's daughter. Yeah, I was almost born at the track. So, yeah, I've been around Canadian Tire Motorsport Park since 1969 to 1980. I want to say 1986, and then I returned in
Do you ever see a festival
19.
there? Music festival? They had a couple.
No, I skipped out on those.
That would have been
Those were
cool.
not our bag, unless it had a
There's
car
some good
race involved
bands.
with it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I do remember there was supposed to be an Alice Cooper concert there one time that I think actually got canceled because it became too rowdy.
Probably.
The Snowbirds flew over actually Motorsport back in the day. There's an old program with the Snowbirds on the cover. And the folks that were there when that happened, which was sometime back in the 70s, they said that it was unexpected and that everything shook.
Right.
Well, because back then those planes were really
Yeah.
loud,
Yeah.
especially that low to the ground, because apparently they weren't obeying the
They
usual
would fly a
ceiling.
little lower. Yeah.
Yeah, because they could,
Yikes.
let's buzz the racetrack for craps and giggles. Back in the 70s, that was far more tolerated than it is now. But, I've been at Mosport for all but 13 years of my life. I'm 51 now. So I've been there a long time.
Right.
Somebody once referred to me as walking, talking motorsport history because I can rhyme off the names of drivers from the 60s and 70s that most people are just like, how do you even remember these
Yeah,
people?
we'll have to share this in our most sport tomorrow now then group or whatever whatever it's
Well,
called.
that's the interesting part is part of the reason why I'm part of that group on Facebook is because every once in a while somebody posts a thing and I'm just like, yeah, I know who that was. Let me ask my
Yeah,
dad,
yeah.
right? Because my father is still with us. And as I like to say, the hamster still runs really well on the wheel in his head.
That's good.
Um, he's got a very sharp memory, and he's very very capable of remembering a great deal. And I mean, he can tell you all kinds of stories. Somebody really actually needs to sit down with this guy and get all the stories out of his head before he passes away. I'm just not the person to do it. Somebody else really needs to. But I mean, my father started racing himself. Oh man, I want to say 1959. I think I have a trophy of his from 1959 here.
Wow.
And he retired from racing in 1972. And by then, he was a qualified international steward, which meant he was qualified to steward. He was the chief steward of Mosport for a while. He was the chief steward of Shannonville for a while. He stewarded everything from NASCAR to IndyCar to Formula One in his day up at Mosport. So,
There is a
and
lot of family. Like it's almost like the motorsport family is a family almost in a way because a lot of people do get involved with it because they're going to your dad who's going to the
yeah,
track and you're there and then that's kind of your life,
absolutely.
right?
Well, between all the different members of my family on both my mother's side and my father's side, if you count it all up, it works out to four generations and over 150 years contributed by the
Wow.
entire family into amateur regional racing, road course racing here in Ontario.
Wow.
So, yeah, when people call me walking, talking history, not so, I don't think so because I think that's a better description of my father. But I can understand why people would think that. And certainly, I mean, I've got my own section of history, right? There's things that I remember happening that other people don't. And actually, my mother passed away about a week and a half ago, almost. No, wait, was it
Sorry to hear that.
tomorrow's Friday? So yeah, 2 weeks ago. Um, And she had been involved in racing for a long, long time. And there's a whole collection of stories and events surrounding just her alone. She started out officiating. She became crew for my dad when they got married. Actually, they met at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, just
Wow.
saying. My mother was engaged to a mortician. She met my dad. Their first date they went on was dinner and the John Frankenheimer's Grand Prix in the movie theater. The
Wow.
rest is
Nice.
history.
Nice.
She broke up with the mortician and married my dad, the race car driver. So there's like a whole host of stories involving her. Um, she might have, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think she might have partied with James Hunt back in the day.
All right. Okay. Yeah. James Hunt, the ladies'
Um,
man.
well, no, it was one of those deals where apparently James Hunt was racing at Mosport, and they said that if James won the race, Lord Hesketh was going to throw a party for all the flag marshals.
Hmm.
And
Nice.
I'm not sure if James Hunt actually won that race or not, but I have a feeling that
Oh,
Lord
okay.
Hesketh probably threw the party anyway. And obviously, since Lord Hesketh was James Hunt's sponsor, then James Hunt would be there if Lord Hesketh threw a party with copious amounts of alcohol,
Yeah.
logically.
Yeah.
But she had met all kinds of people in her life. One of the ones that was a little strange, the one and only champ car race that ever ran at Mont Tremblant, Quebec, we were there for. I think that was 2007 or 2008. And it was Saturday. We were there for the 3 days, my son, my mother, and I. And I was supposed to meet them in the paddock at a particular spot at the end of the day. I'd been out flagging on the track all day. So I get to the spot in the paddock. No mom, no kid. Look at my watch. Okay. Look at my watch. 15 minutes later, still no mom, still no kid.
Uh
Okay. Well, I guess we better start looking around for them. So I start wandering through the paddock and I get to, I'm not sure which name they were going by at the time, but I think it was KV Racing. And in the back private area of KV Racing, I see my mother. I'm like, my mom doesn't even know Jimmy Vassar or
oh.
anybody else associated with KV Racing. What in the
How'd you get
heck is
here?
she doing back there? So there's a crew guy futzing around with, I think he was polishing a wing or moving some tires or something. So I grabbed the guy and I'm like, hi, um, that little old lady in the back there, that's my mother. I've been trying to find her. Would you mind telling her that her daughter is here and that it's time to go? He's like, oh, sure, no problem. So he goes wandering back. There's a little bit of animated conversation between the crew guy and somebody I can't see. And the crew guy then wanders back, starts doing his work again. And Jimmy Vassar walks up to me. I'm like, what in the devil's going on here? And he sticks his hand out and says, hi, Colleen, your mom's been telling me all about you. Thanks for flagging today. Really appreciate it. You look like you could use a Gatorade. Come on back.
Nice.
I'm
Gatorade.
like, wait a minute, what the devil's going on here? So I get back into this private area. Jimmy Vassar gets me a Gatorade. By the way, I have my choice between blue and red, which
Oh
was cool.
yeah. Nice.
Um,
Red.
yeah. And there's my mom sitting there, she's got a coffee in her hand. Sitting next to her is Jimmy Vassar, and on the other side is my son sitting there sipping on like a pop Slurpee thing of some description. And I'm like, Connor, yeah, why are you and your grandmother having coffee with Jimmy Vassar? Like, how
Former
did this
champion.
happen? How did this happen? And my son looks at me and he's like, honestly, Mom, I don't know how Grandma does it. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Right. Does he still do those super trucks at Honda Indy?
No, Paul Tracy was doing them the last time
Okay.
yeah. And I remember that because Paul spun out, spacked a wall, and killed the ComNet. Um, because I hear
Yeah,
about all the
that's
stuff from the Marshals because they're my former buddies,
yeah.
right? I used to work with them trackside. But yeah, so that was one of those great memories of my mom that somehow, without anybody really knowing how, she wound up having coffee with Jimmy Vassar.
That's pretty good. Did she score an interview at least or something or
Oh no, because that
no?
wasn't her bag.
No.
This is the interesting part of it. My mother was, she was just a fixture in the paddock, particularly at an IMSA weekend. Um, Everybody knew who she was. And I have never seen anybody who can network a paddock better than my mother. They all knew her. They all loved her. News of her death got out, and I was getting tributes and comments from crew guys with different IMSA teams and drivers with different IMSA teams who were very sad to hear that she passed away because they all adored her.
Right. Yeah.
And it was really a big deal that she suddenly passed away, and that for me has been heartwarming as well. And it's, yeah, I mean, is what it is.
You'll always remember too, like obviously when you lose a parent, you always remember, but you always specifically remember like the current state of the world and what a tough time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and regrettably 12 hours after my mother died, when we went to go notify my step grandmother that her daughter-in-law died, we discovered that my step grandmother had died as well. So we were kind of like, wow, okay. And we're now sitting in a holding pattern waiting for restrictions to ease up so that we can
You're right.
actually, do interment
Yeah.
services for them all. And actually, this has also held up the celebration of life that was originally planned for this coming weekend for Jim Martin.
Right. The one of the former announcers the at the CTMP there. He's done a lot
Not
of other things
former,
too.
not former. He was still the current
Oh
PA
right.
announcer at the
Yeah.
time of his death. Yeah.
He came.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
He still showed up. Yeah. He still showed up
yeah,
there.
yeah. He was there for the
In the
truck
fall.
weekend, and
Yeah.
he did two regional weekends after that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because I remember saying because you kind of would like you always want to say hi to him, but especially
Yeah.
in a hard time, you kind of want to let him know like hey like how's it going, you know.
Yeah.
That was neat
Yeah.
to see
So,
him that last time there in the fall. But
yeah.
yeah, nonetheless though, it was I know you got the boss for your podcast, wondering where you're at. So we'll
Well, yeah. Well, that's more a case of, okay, so Jake, how can I take 1 hour and fit in one PR person and three pilots?
yeah,
That's the question I got to ask him and see if he's got a brilliant reply to this, because this ought to be fun trying to figure that one out.
yeah.
Because I got to figure out how we can do that, because the Waterloo Warbirds have three separate pilots that they think they
Right.
can put on the show. So
Wow.
I'm kind of like,
Wow. Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't have that much time.
What
So
is
I'm gonna
the
have to talk with them and say, do we want to do one pilot? Do we want to get two pilots? Like, how do you want to? What's gonna work for you, Mr. Producer?
yeah? Where are people able to find that again?
Um, Facebook is Heels on Wheels radio program. The website is performancemotorsportsnetwork.com. If you go to the Facebook page for Performance Motorsport Network as well, there's a whole bunch of lists of ways you can listen, because they're on like TuneIn Radio and
Nice.
iTunes, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, I'm really excited about this coming week's show, doing this with the Waterloo Warbirds, because it's going to be a real eye opener as to how these things come together for these tribute flyovers, because this is a small private organization that put
Mm-hmm.
this one together. So you can only imagine the amount of work that goes into doing it for a large demonstration team like the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels or the Snowbirds.
Right.
you know and actually, funny enough, the one other big demo team that there is in the world that could be doing this right now, I wish they were, but I don't think they are, and I don't think there's any plans announced to have them go up in the air. But boy, wouldn't it be cool for the United Kingdom if the Red Arrows got up flying.
Yeah. That would be
you know
neat. Unfortunately, we can't take pictures of that, but
well, you could have back in September,
yeah, we're okay.
because they
The
were they
last
were
air
in
show.
Toronto in September. Yeah, the last international air show.
Yeah.
And actually, seeing the Red Arrows was a bucket list item for me. So when I got to go see them at the international air show, I
That
was
would have been
so
cool.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I look forward to that, and I also sure will share that because I think for our followers in the region here, I think that'd be very important. Because as I had said, I feel like that you didn't. It's like I feel like the local news outlets should have had the interview that you want to have. So now you're getting it, not them.
well, but I also have the time in the media, and
Of
I,
course,
medium,
yeah,
and I can call
they
my
get a
own.
minute.
shots.
Yeah.
Like they get what, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 45 seconds in order
Yeah.
to create a shot for the show. And actually, they did do a good one for the 6 o'clock news that night.
I didn't catch it.
It was pretty good. CTV Kitchener did
Okay.
a really nice one. But I have much more flexibility, so I can dig a whole lot deeper, find out a lot more, talk about a lot more.
Right.
And I'm really, really excited to talk about what they've done because, and this is the beauty of it, unlike all of the other flyover tributes that have been done that we've been hearing about, these guys are a privately funded organization. They are not a military demonstration team. So there's no public money involved in it. Although I have to clarify, as an organization, because they are dedicated to maintaining the history of Cold War era
Right.
aviation, so
Yeah.
post World War II, they do receive a small grant from the government of Canada in terms of heritage. But that grant helps to keep them going.
Yeah, of course.
But what they did this past Tuesday really has nothing to do with that grant whatsoever, other than the fact that they exist.
Right.
And because they exist, they could do this. But the actual flyover itself, the cost of that were completely privately funded. No government money was involved in it, which makes them unique in terms of that flyover because almost everywhere else, it's a military flyover.
Right.
From the Snowbirds, which are part of the Canadian Forces, to the Thunderbirds, to the Blue Angels, to the National Guard flyovers that are also happening in various states in the U.S. All of those are military demonstrations. This particular one with the Waterloo Warbirds, absolutely 1000% not.
I think it's
So,
important to have that kind of talked about because right now there's a lot of misinformation about a lot of things, and even some of the stuff that we were talking about in this show. There's a lot of misinformation going around, and not only that, like it's good to talk as well. It's good to communicate and reach out and
mhm.
discuss things, and to be able to have something that we were lacking the last couple months is that discussion. A lot of people are kind of paranoid, or which is rightfully so. A lot of people also don't care, and I think it's good to have that information out there, and that's kind of what my goal is with these series of episodes for this Victoria Day weekend. Is because originally I would have had a show, and I'm sure you would have had tons of stuff,
Yeah,
and now we kind of got to do something in lieu of that, and that's what I'm trying to do with the series of episodes
yeah.
here. Is just to people need to talk, and people just need to hear some different opinions. Maybe they'll
Yeah.
agree, maybe they won't.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't expect anybody to listen to my show or anything I say anywhere else and agree with it because
Hmm.
why?
Right.
You can or you cannot. It's entirely up to you. Um, I have tried really hard not to go digging on my own show too far down the rabbit hole of, oh my God, pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've gotten into a few things about it because I also work grocery retail. I've said, like, look, guys, when you walk into the grocery store, please don't abuse the grocery store staff because I'm
Exactly.
one of them, and we really, really need you to cut us a break because life is crap right now.
Yeah.
Like I've said that kind of thing. But in terms of reopenings and timings of all that and everything else, I've
You
really
got to be
tried not
careful.
to
Yeah.
say much. I've probably said more in talking with you today than I have on my own show, ironically.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's like I said, that was kind of the goal here, is because I
yeah.
mean I know of other podcasters and people in the media, and it's good to have that initial discussion get started amongst ourselves and trying to
And
figure
let's
out
be
where we're all
blunt.
at.
We can all be sitting in the media center at CTMP, watch an incident happen on the video monitor all at the same time, and get 16 different opinions from the people in the media center
Right.
as to what was involved in that incident.
Right.
And we're all watching the same thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And that's just it. Is it's really variety of opinions and being able to kind of come to your own conclusions is important.
Exactly. And
And
especially
I
right
mean,
now.
yeah, and all I'm doing is kind of throwing out, this is what I see, this is what I don't understand or don't know, and these are the things I don't know that I believe, once they can be qualified or quantified, will have an influence on what we think will happen,
Right.
right? Because the reality is nobody knows.
Right. Yeah.
there isn't an expert on this planet that knows everything about what's going to happen here or can predict. Heck, they don't even know everything about this virus.
Right, exactly. So,
You know,
and then we're still kind of in the early stage, you know, and
exactly. And in the meantime, I'm just going to keep looking for interesting stories, for interesting opportunities,
yeah.
to bring people on the show to talk about various and sundry things that they're doing. We try to get women on the show. There are some challenges to that because they don't have a whole lot to talk about right now.
Hmm.
But, you know, in the meantime, we go looking for what we can to provide interest, to provide entertainment. The show that we had Kate Gunlock on was really cool because we had the guy in charge of production for iRacing on as a secondary interview to her. So it
Hmm.
was basically the IndyCar iRacing show slash whatever.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the show after that, we had no guests on, and we just, you know, Colleen sat there and complained about a bunch of stuff because Colleen does that. For God's sake, people, put your pet in a goddamn carrier when you take them in the car, because if you don't, they're a projectile.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I've seen dogs killed that way. You know,
That's
like that
terrible.
kind of thing
Yeah,
is what
yeah.
I end up talking about. And certainly, I'm going to have some conversation about Mr. I know how to handle 308 kilometers an hour in a car on a public highway. Yeah, no, you don't. You're an
Yeah.
idiot. And by the way, your brother who turned around and sassed the OPP on Twitter, not a smart guy.
Yeah, it's, a lot of people say stupid shit on Twitter.
Yeah, but when you sit there and taunt the OPP on Twitter
Yeah.
after they just busted your brother for like racing, street racing, I hope you're not planning on driving a car anywhere anytime
Yeah.
soon, because you're going to be tailed by the OPP the whole time, buddy, because you
Yeah.
just admitted you're going to do it. They'll have you red-handed. It's not an issue. Um, you know, and you can only do that so many times and get charged so many
Hmm.
times and convicted so many times before they take away your driver's license, and then your life really sucks. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's best not to just break the law and obey the
Yeah.
law.
But you know, there's that kind of thing that I end up doing
Yeah.
too on the show. But I mean, we have a lot of fun with it. One of these days, I want to actually do like an interactive thing where we have like our listeners actually calling in and we're talking with them, because we've never done that, and I would really love to do that.
Yeah, but a lot of people are they're, you know, there's a lot of people adapting to technology in these hard times
Yeah.
and they're trying to figure out new things. It's even what this again, you know, that the whole goal of this was also to try to experiment with a new podcast format as opposed to the old school radio format.
Yeah.
And obviously, it is definitely a different. The podcast format is definitely a different situation, you
Absolutely.
know. So yeah, and the way you know people are. Some people are really good with technology, and some people aren't. And
Yeah.
um, like I don't know where you're at with with what you use specifically.
I'm not using a whole lot of sophisticated. That's one thing that hasn't changed about doing our radio show,
Right.
is that actually our producer is in North Carolina. One
Wow.
of our co-hosts is in California. The other one is in, or no, she's not in California. Maybe, no, she's in North Carolina as
So you're
well.
kind of all over.
The other one's in Virginia, and I'm up here in Waterloo Region, Ontario. So, and you know, when we had Sabrina as a co-host, she was in Illinois, outside of Chicago. You know, like Krista was in Maryland. Um, so like we were all over the place. So the one thing that hasn't changed about our radio show is, since we weren't already meeting in a studio to record,
Right.
we were quite
It's
prepared
yeah.
for not meeting in a studio to record.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
you know, that is the one thing that I can tell you for sure hasn't changed. Other than that, everything else has in some way, shape, or
And
form.
these interviews are also like I'm used to interviewing people in person at the track as
Yeah.
opposed to like I had to install and kind of teach myself how to use this program I'm using right now and
Yep.
had to use some Photoshop skills in here and whatnot and there's video editing. Now it's all over as opposed to me just microphone and going into the studio and pressing. Obviously, I would edit up the interviews a little bit, but
Yeah.
you know, other than just basically pressing play and then you know with a nice soundboard in front of you, that's all you need is just those buttons. But
Yep.
now, now I'm
Now it's
just
all
using my.
different.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Like this program, that's basically almost what the program is. Is what I'm using is a
Yep.
digital soundboard, so
Yep.
or a
So
visual
anyway,
board as well.
thank you ever so much for
Yeah,
talking with
thank you
me,
for
James. It
giving.
was a lot
Yeah,
of
you
fun.
know, it's. I think again, it's important to talk, and it's important to have a different perspective during these hard times, and especially someone of yourself who, as you say, you're a walking history book. So,
Well, no, I'm not the walking history book. I'm the daughter of the
oh yeah,
walking
yeah, your
history
dad is
book.
the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the daughter of the walking
Some
history
people
book.
just say you are.
Yeah, no, I'm totally the daughter of the walking history book. I'm not the actual walking history book. So if you wanted to, I would be more than happy to sign off on this interview using the sign off that I normally use for the
Yeah,
radio show.
go for it.
Excellent. So for James Jordan, myself, Colleen Allen, Heels on Wheels on the Performance Motorsport Network. Everybody, the voice of women in motorsport, and enjoy your racing this weekend, wherever you find it.
Nice. Thank you. Hey there, thank you for watching our video. Make sure you head on over to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at the WWOMS.